Rocky Top Insider presents the RTI Rim Runner with Bob Baskerville and Ryan Shumpert.
Welcome. Hope you all had a Merry Christmas as we're heading into the new year now. We're back with the RTI Rim Runner. We're scattered all over the place. I'm Bob Baskerville, joined as always by Ryan Shumpert, one of the superstars over here at Rocky Top Insider. Got a lot to talk about. We've had a little bit of a break, but we are about to head into the belly of the beast, so to speak, with SEC conference play and then everything else that's going on all around the country. We appreciate you joining us today. As always, we ask you, if you're checking us out on video on the Rocky Top Insider YouTube channel, make sure you like and subscribe. That really means a lot to us. We're getting a lot of good support, so we appreciate that. Maybe you listen to us as a podcast. That's perfectly fine as well. Just make sure you're downloading that podcast, adding it to your library. We're hoping that you're looking to us as one of the go-tos during this college basketball season, not just for what's going on with the Vols, but also things that are happening with SEC basketball, as well as basketball all around the country. And there is a lot of news happening, not just the games themselves, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. But before that, would love to say hello and check in with my guy, Ryan Shumpert. Ryan, how you doing? You navigating the holidays well?
Yeah, doing well. I don't know if I'm doing as well as you down in sunny Florida, but it was nice and warm up here in Tennessee for a week, and now we're back to normal winter. But just kind of a smile because it happened, don't cry because it's over with that one warm week. But back in Knoxville, at least for a few days before I head to Fayetteville, and doing well and ready for SEC play and conference play to get going.
Yeah, I've been a little spoiled. We've been down here for a little bit and heading back on the morning after New Year's. So it's coming to an end, and I know it's going to be a little more chilly up north, but it'll be good to be back home. And what better time to get back to, because basketball is about to get very, very real for the Vols and all the other teams. That's what we're going to talk about today. Little status check on Tennessee basketball as they prepare for this opening week of conference play, as Ryan mentioned, starting on Saturday in Fayetteville against Arkansas. Then we have Texas coming to town next week, and the beat goes on from there. Speaking of, we're also going to play a little bit of the prediction game today, not only in the SEC, but across the other power conferences as basketball takes center stage for the better part of the next 3 months. We'll give you our thoughts on who we think are going to win those conference titles, maybe a team to keep an eye on, like a dark horse. And for me, at least, it's going to be some names that in years past might not have been dark horses, but now they're kind of there's kind of a changing of the guard happening, or a leveling of the playing field when it comes to college basketball. So we're going to get to all of that, but let's start with our opening tip, and that's regarding the Tennessee Vols. After a frustrating 3-game losing streak that happened earlier this month, Tennessee basketball rights the ship with decisive wins over Louisville, Gardner-Webb, and South Carolina State. Average margin of victory in those 3 wins was nearly 40 points. Now, a couple of things. We already covered that big Louisville win on this show, the last one we did before the holidays. And the wins against Gardner-Webb and South Carolina State weren't nail-biters by any stretch. But I do think there are a few takeaways that we feel could be impactful for the Vols as they start a very tough stretch of games in the next matter of days, essentially. Ryan, you've been there covering these games too, particularly the most recent one, which was just against South Carolina State, where we effectively almost doubled them up in a final score. One of the things I've noticed from afar in these 2 games, we can talk all day long about Jacoby Gillespie and Nate Ament, and we'll probably spend a minute or two on them a little later, but Rick's using this as a chance to get a lot of the reserves out there, it appears. And to me, it seems that some of these guys are truly emerging. I want to get your take on that because you have been right there following some of that.
Yeah, not just getting them out there, but getting them out there early. I mean, Tennessee played 12 guys in the first 10 minutes against South Carolina State on Tuesday night, and Tennessee didn't lead by double digits in that game until about 10 minutes in. They didn't necessarily come out on fire, and it wasn't like they got up 15-0 run and started getting guys in. It was, still not that the game was ever really in any doubt, but Tennessee hadn't separated themselves before getting those guys some action. But no, I mean, obviously Dwayne Brown with Cade Phillips' injury, it feels like he's a little bit more cemented into what his role is going to be, or at least he's going to have a role. But Amari Evans is the one that really feels like he's starting to differentiate himself or get himself in that mix with whether it be Ethan Berg or Amari Abrams, some of those guards off the bench behind Bishop Boswell. And just another good game for him last night or Tuesday night, depending on when you're listening to this, against South Carolina State. 13 minutes, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, got a block in there, and then 14 points efficient scoring. But it feels like over the last handful of games, even games that have been a little more meaningful, he's been getting more and more minutes. Brian Lentz talked about it. I know Greg Polinsky was on the drive with y'all talking about it. Rick Barnes has talked about it. Most improved player over the last month has been some verbiage that some of Tennessee's coaches have used, and his minutes just keep going up. And when I was just looking at it, and this I guess isn't a shock, but looking at Tennessee's Bart Torvik page, and by far their worst defensive outings and very bad defensive outings against Houston, Kansas, and Illinois. At least bad, maybe not very bad. Those are really the three good, true, besides Louisville, 3 to 4 good teams Tennessee's played, and in those games, Tennessee faces better teams and can't overwhelm everybody with athleticism as much.
Right.
It sets the stage more for Amari Evans to get more minutes because of what he can do on the defensive end. And then I just continue to be impressed. And I don't mean this as a knock on Bishop Boswell, but last year you saw Bishop Boswell. He understood what he had to do to get on the court, which was playing defense. But he was not confident in himself offensively. Wouldn't hardly look at the basket. Amari Evans, I think he understands that defense is what gets him on the court, but he plays with a lot of confidence offensively. It doesn't always look great. I don't think he's certainly not a finished product offensively, but you're seeing him be a little bit of a threat to score too. So we'll see if that continues as the competition gets harder, and he can't just overwhelm opponents with athleticism as much. But a lot to like from Evans over the last couple of weeks for Tennessee.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary of it all. I mean, in these 3 games we've talked about during this 3-game winning streak, Evans, you talked about his performance Tuesday night against South Carolina State. He's averaging in those 3 games like 9 points, 3 boards, only about 10 minutes per game. However, that's largely attributable to that Louisville game when he fouled out in 7 minutes of play. Still was impactful. But yeah, that's one of the things we talked with Polinsky about, like you mentioned, too. It's like if we can kind of control the fouls. Barnes was doing his typical ribbing of his players, which shows that he cares, right? He told apparently Amari after that Louisville game, we're going to change your uniform number to 7-5. So he was like, Coach, what do you mean? He goes, well, 7 minutes, 5 fouls. That's
yeah.
So they're working him, but I mean he is. My question to you, between him, I was watching the evolution of Bishop Boswell, right? And I've been saying, okay, maybe he's going to be, Coach Barnes's Meshack. And he's still contributing, had a nice game Tuesday night, 5 boards, 6 assists, just a couple points, but still he's doing all the other things. And then, of course, he impacts the game defensively. But Evans, to me, and I want to get your thoughts. It feels like he could be more effective offensively. He might have more upside from an offensive perspective than Meshack ever did. And that's with all due respect to Jemai, who ended up finishing out a great run at Tennessee.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way. He's, again, I don't know if it's just confidence and shooting more, so that's leading to increased numbers, but he's showed a little bit more offensive juice, and I think that's been the case in practice. And that was, you always wonder with summer talking points how much to glean, but that was something that some of the Tennessee's coaches were saying before he got hurt in the summer, for the second time when he got hurt late in the summer and they had to shut him down, that he was starting to shoot the ball pretty well and be a pretty good offensive player. So, that definitely feels possible. And that's a conversation for another day, but I do think it's an interesting long-term question for this Tennessee team. And or Tennessee program, not Tennessee team, of how do Amari Evans and Bishop Oswald coexist? Can those two guys, are there enough minutes? Can you get enough offensively from them to play them together? Is one of those guys going to be okay coming off the bench and maybe having a little bit of a lesser role? Long term, how do those guys coexist? Because from my standpoint, and it's probably a fool's errand in today's college basketball, but you just look at the young players on this Tennessee roster, and it's hard. It's hard not to like a lot of them, and seeing how Tennessee could kind of build with a new core moving forward over the next couple of years if Rick Barnes still wants to do this, still wants to coach.
Yeah, agreed. One more thing before we put a bow on this most recent game against South Carolina State. Again, you were there covering it, and one of the things I saw was in the box score. Again, I have to admit, I ended up watching the key plays later. I did not watch the game live. We were at the movies. Marty Supreme, check it out. Great movie. That's where we were with the family. But I was checking out the statistics in the box score, and I mean, this was an absolute clinic as far as our interior play. It looked like to me. I mean, such an advantage in points in the paint, rebounding, offensive rebounding, and I get it that it's against a 1-win South Carolina State team, but I do think that foreshadows, again, this is who we are by and large this year. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, I think it has to be a big strength. Certainly the rebounding, and 66.7% offensive rebounding rate was the highest of the season. 15.8 defensive rebounding percentage was the lowest of the season. So they were good there on both ends. And yeah, I think, look, Jacoby Gillespie and Nate Amin aren't going to be great every night. They haven't been great every night to this point, and they're not going to be great every night going forward. And when that's the case, there's just not a whole lot of other scoring options on the perimeter. So you're going to have to turn to those guys down low and, hope you can, Jalen Carey feels like it's been really consistent, which has obviously been the knock on him, and hope JP Estrella can be more consistent defensively, because it does feel like what he gives Tennessee offensively is pretty consistent. So yeah, that's going to be a big piece of it. Certainly a much bigger one than it's been the last handful of years.
Yeah, it looked like, again, based on the parts I saw of the game, it looked like the two-man game was working well, too, between JP and Jalen, right? I mean, that's the part I love seeing, is when that happens. I definitely used to see it with JP and Cade Phillips, so now with Cade out of the mix, pretty incumbent to get Jalen in that mix. And we've talked about Kerry before in terms of his handle for a guy as big and monstrous as he is. He's got a pretty good handle, so it's I like seeing. It's a little bit of a throwback what we're seeing there, but I'm just saying that to temper expectations for the fan base, et cetera, going into conference play. This is just not going to be a team that's going to be dropping 18, 19 threes a night. That's not who we are.
No, it's a team that's going to pound the ball inside and shoot 18 to 25 threes most games, somewhere in that range. And, I think, I'll say that for later. We have a part later. I'll save that note for. But yeah, you're gonna play inside out. And anything I think you get from Felix Okpara and Dwayne Brown there is kind of gravy. You certainly want a little bit, but Kerry and Estrella are the two guys that are going to need to. I feel like most games, if Tennessee doesn't have one of those guys in double digits, they're probably going to be in some trouble offensively.
Real quick, I don't think you and I have talked about this, but this was off the heels of our interview that you mentioned with Polinsky. I'm going all the way back to the Louisville game for a second, because in that game, it felt to me, we might have even talked about it on our prior podcast, that Felix Okpara felt, to me at least, particularly in the first half of that Louisville game, it felt like he was a little bit lost offensively. But he came around in the second half, certainly, protected the rim well, got out on the perimeter and defended well there. What was interesting to me, and it kind of gets filed into the shows you what we know file of, Polinsky mentioned it. He went out of his way. I didn't even bring it up. He went out of his way to mention that after that Louisville game, he had multiple calls from some of his NBA scouting community, those friends, saying how impressed they were with Felix. And it wasn't necessarily about the offense. It was about his activity on the defense and the fact that he could get out and guard the perimeter. it was just very interesting to me because when you hear it that way, it sounds like, okay, there could be a place in the league for Felix, whether it's a two-way or whatever, but it's for all the other little things. We know he can dunk. We know he can hit a mid-range every once in a while. We've seen him hit a three, but it's really about how he can change the game defensively.
Yeah, no doubt. That's, again, like I said, want to see he can be frustrating sometime with his hands around the rim. He can be
Right.
frustrating sometimes. Some true bunnies that he'll miss, and you want to see that stuff cleaned up. But really, I mean, it's the defense and the rebounding. That's all I want to see from him. That's what goes back to what I said a minute ago. As we get an SEC play, and this Tennessee team that's not as good defensively as they've been in years past.
Yeah.
Felix is the guy that's elite defensively. He needs to be an anchor at the rim, and they need him consistently being a guy that changes the way the game's played at the basket every night defensively, and whatever you get offensively from him, that's it's kind of whatever. You obviously want better performances, but it's Felix will be judged and graded by his head coach by what he brings on the defensive end every night.
Yeah. Yeah, we always spend time talking about Jacoby Gillespie, Nate Ahmed, of course. I do want to get your take based on what you saw Tuesday night from Nate. Again, qualifying it that it's against South Carolina State, but I also saw some of Coach Barnes's post-game comments that you had put out there on RockyTopInsider.com. I mean, he had a couple plays where he looked the part last night of that five-star freshman, but still didn't shoot well at the line, and a couple kind of silly turnovers. I mean, what's your status report on Nate? Has it changed much since we've talked 2 weeks ago?
No, not really. I mean, I think what I like is what I've heard, and I guess really, one practice we were at, it sounds like he's had some of his better stretches of practice since the season started. I think that's positive, and I thought he played well against South Carolina State. Showed some aggression and got to the mid range and made some more shots there, even though he didn't get a 3-pointer to go. But no, it's largely the same, and I think it's Rick made the comparison to Chaz last year of how much better Chaz was in SEC play at the end of January as a start. I wonder with Chaz, you saw he was so good in non-conference play, and you saw that step back in January. I think that's you want to see. I'm with Rick Barnes that ideally, probably, Nate's going to be a lot better into January, start of January. To me, it's can Nate avoid that drop-off? Can he be a little bit better than he's been against – can he be like he was against Louisville or better than he was against Illinois and Houston or the second half of that Kansas game, and then build off that? Can he avoid a step back before he starts to build and play a little bit better and learn more and more things about the SEC and just college basketball as a whole?
Yeah. Well, we'll certainly be monitoring it. I'm not going to lie. I know, again, opponent notwithstanding, that first dunk he had in transition was it was nice to see. I just want to see him be a little more assertive and forceful. I know I'm speaking for the fan base, and I know Coach Barnes feels that way, and we'll see. We'll be certainly monitoring. It's like we said earlier, it's about to get real. Very quickly, and this is not directly affiliated with the current team, you kind of knew where this was going to net out, but we were heavily pursuing, and we were a finalist in the consideration set for five-star recruit from the class of 26, Darren Rippey Jr., but he has made his commitment decision, and spoiler alert, it ain't us.
Yeah, Rippey going to Duke. I think Tennessee probably finished third in that one. I think Duke and NC State both. Obviously Duke, I think NC State as well. We're ahead of Tennessee. So, I think it – you want the positive spin on it, and I don't even necessarily think this is really coping. I think if Tennessee got Rippey for sure, and probably Miles Sadler too, that guy's your starting point guard next year, and probably have to pay more for a guy in the portal, and Tennessee obviously got kind of a hometown discount with Gillespie. But generally speaking, I don't know. I just trust those guys in the portal who have done it a little bit more. Certainly Tennessee's hit rate with their top paying guy they get out of the portal has been pretty darn high. So, that's, I think, the direct implications to next year. And then, we'll see where this recruiting class goes from here for Tennessee. If that's basically everybody. Tennessee had visit this fall has committed somewhere. Cody Peck, a low 4-star power forward from the Charlotte area, is still out there, but I don't think Tennessee's pushing real hard in that one. I think it was kind of a get in the boat at the early signing period if you want, but they didn't have any sort of big financial offer out to him, and I don't think they're pushing hard. So we'll see if any new names pop up. Obviously, typically in March, as coaches get fired, there's a reshuffling of the board, and you have the high school seasons in the rear view, and occasionally some late bloomers, but feels like will probably be a relatively quiet stretch for 26 high school recruiting. I'm sure Tennessee will have a ton of 2027s on campus over the next 2 months as SEC play gets going.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think you texted me that night of the Duke Texas Tech game that was going on in the Garden, I believe, and you spotted Rippy sitting behind the Duke bench, and we are like, oh, okay, that tells us a lot, right? He was there for a game of that magnitude, and we'd already been hearing some of the drum beats about where he might end up, but that when you sent me that text, I was like, okay, we're not getting that guy. That's a bummer, but we'll be all right. We will be all right. Just put a bow on Tennessee before we widen our lens. So we wrap up 2025. Tennessee's 10-3. They move up a spot in the latest AP poll. They are up to 19th. They remain at 20th on the USA Today coaches poll. Currently 16th overall in Ken Palm. That really hasn't moved much. 14th in Bart Torvik. 26th in the net, 2-2 record in quad 1 games. That Syracuse loss is a quad 2 loss at the moment. Bracketology has us floating around that 4 or 5 range. I mean, I think all of this sounds pretty fair for what we've seen from this team so far, Ryan. And we'll see how the conference play goes and if they can build on that. But I don't know. I don't know if that's the ceiling for this team, is being in this kind of strata. And we're going to find out, but I don't know. You get moments like the Louisville game and you think, okay, there's potential for something better than what the status quo is.
Yeah, I think if Tennessee's going to be better than the status quo, it probably has to be one of 2 things. I think Nate Ament has to kind of turn into a superstar, or I think this team has to the Louisville game, kind of get much closer to where they've been defensively. Because I think this team offensively, I don't see the path to being way better than they've been without Nate Ament taking a big jump. And look, that could happen. And offensively, they're really not too far off from where they've been the last couple of years. It's pretty similar. And I think that's what you would say to when the offense is pretty similar and the defense is a step behind where it's been. That's kind of what, to me is the difference. In the last 2 years, they've been 2 seeds, and this year they're tracking for a 4 or 5 seed at this point. I think, that's probably the difference in those teams. So one of those 2 things, and I think either of those, it wouldn't shock me if they happened, but I wouldn't bet on it either. So that's kind of what it feels like. I would point to, and maybe this is oversimplifying things, and Tennessee fans listen to this probably say I don't really care between an Elite 8, Sweet 16. It's not that big of a difference after the last 2 years, but can you make a push to get a 3 seed? Because man, those 1 seeds are good, and to that point, I kind of made it. You're going to have to play them at some point, but it's you just look at who's going to be a 1 seed, and it's hard to see Tennessee winning a Sweet 16 game against any of those teams.
Yeah, I agree too. Well, let's like I said, widen the lens. We'll talk about our other big thing for today. As conference play arrives for all of the Power 5, it had already started in some conferences, but we wanted to take a minute today and do a little top-line preview of what we see happening in those conferences. Who do we think will win each respective conference title? Who's a bona fide dark horse in each conference? Maybe who disappoints us, etc. Ryan, let's start with our own SEC and I'll go first. I mean, I don't want this to look like I'm just defaulting to who may be the highest rated team in the country currently from the SEC. But man, I am so impressed with Vanderbilt, and it just seems like they are a team. I think what's going to be interesting for me is to see. I don't think they're going to beat themselves. First of all, they're so well coached by Byington. I just wonder how they can truly match up physically with some of these other teams, even us in certain circumstances, but certainly Florida, Arkansas, Alabama. But for me, at the moment, I would probably lean towards Vanderbilt being my favorite to win the conference this year because we've talked about this. The SEC is still very, very good, but it's a little more wide open than it was last year.
Yeah, for sure. I really got to 2 points, and I guess I'm kind of going back on, my pick, or not my pick, but some comments a couple shows ago. But I'm taking Florida to win the league, and Vanderbilt was a close second, but I think some of it just look. I think there's going to be some regression to the mean here. Florida's basically lost every close game they've played. They've shot the ball terribly from 3-point range. And look, I don't think they're going to be a great shooting team, but I do think they're better than a 28% 3-point shooting team. I think Xavier Lee's better than a 25% 3-point shooter. I think Boogie Fland's better than I don't think he's a very good shooter, but I think he's better than a 22% 3-point shooter. So, some of it is that. Some of it's just schedule. Like, look, Florida gets Georgia, Kentucky, and South Carolina twice, which isn't overly easy. We'll see. Georgia, to me, is probably one of the big X factors in the league.
Yeah.
Of the teams they play once, they get Tennessee, Auburn, Alabama, Arkansas at home, and they go to Vanderbilt. So it's a very favorable from a home way standpoint. Yeah. And look, I think you could say the same to a lesser degree about Vanderbilt too. They get, they play Tennessee, Kentucky. I'm not sure who the third team they get twice is, but they get Bama, Florida, Georgia at home. They go to Auburn and Arkansas. So, again, it's relatively favorable there. To me, look, I could be proven wrong. Tennessee could emerge. Alabama can emerge. I definitely think Florida or Vanderbilt, I think I would say are the two best teams in the league at this point. At least Vanderbilt is one of the two best teams, and Florida's probably the team I trust the most. And when you look at the schedules, that's what I'd go with. But, yeah, it's just Florida. They're so good rebounding. The best rebounding team in the country. I just trust them, especially when you look at the schedule.
Yeah, I mean, in Florida, I'm just still a little skeptical of the guard play. That's all. But you're right. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to bet against the defending national champion who returned quite a bit of their nucleus, just not so much on the perimeter. But let's talk about dark horses there. My dark horse. Honestly, there's two teams. I think you mentioned them. You called them an X factor. I'm going to be very interested to see what Georgia does here in conference. I mean, they open up, I think they open up against Auburn here this week.
Yep.
At home at Stegman. That's going to be an interesting game because Georgia has obviously plowed through their non-conference, done a really good job. I do think they've probably, by and large, they have no Asa Newell, but they upgraded their roster in the offseason. I think that they. I'm not saying they can win that conference. Don't confuse my point with that. But I do think that they can certainly be an upper tier team, which is a far cry from where they've been in years prior. And then the other one I would say that's kind of a dark horse is our guys. We're kidding ourselves. I think you and I know this, but there's no way Tennessee is in that top 4 right now in terms of the SEC. But could they get a string going? They've proven they can play with anybody. They beat Houston. They beat Louisville, two at the time, at or near top 10 ranked teams. So they've proven they can do it. It's just it comes back down to what we've been talking about, consistency. But those are my two dark horses in the conference.
All right. Trying to make sure I heard you correct. You said you don't think Tennessee is one of the 4 best teams in the SEC right now?
I don't.
Okay. To me, yeah, where would you put them?
I'd put them probably 5th.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fair. I think Alabama, Tennessee, and Arkansas are all pretty comparable. And I would probably have Tennessee 3rd or 4th, but, look, again, it's pretty comparable. Georgia's, that's what I have. I don't really have and none of these X factors or what's the word that we're using to describe these teams? Dark horse teams, necessarily in any conferences might not win the league. I kind of look more at top 4. And Georgia's a big one. And it's just fascinating. They're 3rd in adjusted tempo right now. Mike White's in his 11th year coaching in the SEC. They've only been top 100 in at Florida and Georgia in tempo one other time, which was 2 years ago. They were 96 at Georgia. Multiple teams in the 300s in his Florida tenure. They played fast when he was at Louisiana Tech before Florida, but this is just a very very Mike White like team, and Georgia's been super impressive. The resume, it hasn't been a ton of super difficult games, but they've largely taken care of business. They rolled a solid Cincinnati team, who's probably the best team they've played besides Clemson, who they lost to in overtime. So I like a lot about them. And you mentioned Asa Newell. You also have Silas Demery that's gone. So a ton
Yeah.
of credit to what Mike White's done. And it's just me being a little bit of a Mike White, a mediocre Mike White unbeliever, I guess, that I need to see it to believe it. And then the other one kind of I definitely believe in Georgia more than LSU, but LSU's another team that's,
Yeah.
in the top 40 in KenPom, kind of similar. They've been good offensively and pretty shaky defensively. So they'll be, again, I don't even necessarily view them as a dark horse. It would shock me if they finished uh, in the top 4 in the SEC. But when it comes to being a tournament team, I was looking at it this morning and pulling it up here now. Here's just some stats that really surprised me. I was looking at Bart Torvik's turning cast,
Mhm.
predicting he was going to make tournament. This dichotomy stunned me. LSU was at 77%, above Auburn at 71. And then a drop off from Auburn to the next closest team is Texas A&M at 33.7 and Texas at 28.9. I don't know. LSU to me, they feel similar to Texas and Texas A&M. I was surprised to see that, and they're a team that the analytics like Georgia, and I'm much higher on Georgia than I am LSU, but a team
Yeah.
the analytics like, and I'm just slow to get on board with. They just haven't really played anybody. They beat SMU. That was a good win, and they played Texas Tech and got killed in that game. So we'll see. Maybe Matt McMahon will prove me wrong, but that's a team I'll be very interested by once we get into SEC play.
By the way, back to what you were mentioning earlier, and this just lends to, I think, further credence to Vanderbilt's path forward. Their other two-game partner in the SEC play is Ole Miss,
Yeah.
and I mean, Ole Miss is not a dog per se, but I mean, I'm not sure. I'm still a little sketchy on the Ole Miss. So I mean, it just underscores what you were saying about some of these other teams. They have pretty nice draws in their conference play.
Bottom 4 team in the league, Ole Miss is, I think, for sure. So
great.
And I'd say too, with Vanderbilt early in SEC play, they open with South Carolina, Alabama at home, LSU at home, at Texas. That's a losable game. But the two big games early: Alabama at home, Florida at home. Can they get one of those games? They get one of those games, they're going to be in the thick of this thing, I think, all year long.
Yeah. Let's jump to the Big Ten. For me, my pick to win the conference, I mean, this is, again, not a shocker, but I've been so impressed. We've talked about Michigan a lot, and I just feel like they are built for not only conference play, but for a deep run in March. I mean, if they can stay out of the injury cycle, the team that Dusty May has put together is frankly kind of scary. I really felt like Purdue was far and away going to be the best team in the Big Ten going into basketball season. But man, that's changed dramatically. The way Michigan State's playing, and then of course the way Michigan is playing and the way they're built. It's hard for me to pick against anybody but them to win the Big Ten.
Does Michigan lose a game in January? They get USC at home, at Penn State, Wisconsin at home, at Washington, at Oregon, home against Indiana, home against Ohio State, home against Nebraska, and then the last day of January, or second to last day of January, they go to Michigan State. It's hard to see any world where they lose a game before that Michigan State game.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that I find interesting, because we've seen this happen before, Ryan, with other teams. I mean, one that really, well, we're seeing it, I think, in real time this year with Kentucky. We've seen it maybe year before last with Arkansas, where the transfer portal is not the solution. As a matter of fact, you bring in all sorts of players and they don't really mesh well, and it doesn't matter about the talent, the chemistry's off. It feels like Michigan got all these talented guys, and they all seem to be playing really well together and enjoying playing together. That's going to be a very tough mix to beat.
Yeah, and it's funny. It felt like the first 2 weeks of the season they might be, a point to the alternative. Obviously, we've talked about it on here. The Wake Forest game, they won in overtime. TCU, who looks a lot better than they did at the time. I can't remember who it was. TCU barely beat someone bad in their opener. So when they played Michigan close early, they lost to New Orleans in their opener. So that felt like, maybe they're not that good, but they've put it together. And all this to say, and I don't know, maybe this is me getting outside the norm too much. I think I'm going to take Purdue to win the league. It's a little bit of a trust thing, kind of like Florida again.
Mhm.
And look, Michigan, I would say I certainly have a good bit more trust in Michigan than I do Vanderbilt, but some of it's scheduling too.
Yeah.
I just look at that. I just went through it with Michigan how easy it is in January, but that obviously it comes back around the other way too. Just a gauntlet to end the year. They obviously not going to be an ACC game or a Big Ten game, but they played Duke, I think, in Madison Square Garden in the middle of February too. Illinois, Iowa on the road, Michigan State at home to end the season. They do go to Mackey and Purdue. So, I mean, just their last 7 games in a regular season, they play UCLA, Purdue, Duke, a reprieve with Minnesota, and then that Illinois, Iowa, Michigan State. So it's just a gauntlet, and look, they're really, really good. They may survive it. But I think from a narrative standpoint, we're going to get to the end of January, and people are going to start having it's Michigan against the field competition or conversations, and I would temper that a little bit. And certainly they're a more complete team than Purdue, but that game being in Mackey and just a Purdue core that's been there, and I trust. Again, maybe I'm getting a little too testy with it or overthinking things, but I'll take Purdue to win the league.
You can hardly go wrong with either one, I would say. I mean, they're both going to be very much in the mix in March, I would believe. Tell me your dark horse. Who's your dark horse?
Yeah, this is a legit dark horse to win the league. But Illinois, look, I just love Illinois. They're, I think, my favorite team to watch this year. I always have one of those emerge, and it's them losing that game to Nebraska, who is good, but losing a home game in conference play before January 1st, and a race that's going to be this tough, I think, comes back to get them. And then my dark horse for like a top 4, I'm going to go with UCLA. Can they survive some of these Midwest road trips? That's obviously plagued them last year. Mick Cronin, kind of whined and moaned about it. And I really go, it's this first one. To me, is going to be the biggest one. To go to Iowa on Saturday and then Wisconsin on Tuesday. Can you at least win one of those games? But, some of these other West Coast trips are manageable. Like, you go to Michigan and Michigan State, you're probably going to lose both those games back to back. But Minnesota on the road, you feel like you should win that one. Penn State, Ohio State road trip back to back, like both those games are very manageable. If they can get like 2 of Iowa, Wisconsin, and Ohio State on the road, I could very easily see this being a team that finishes in the top 4 of the conference.
Pretty interesting ones. You and I are aligned on UCLA. I do think UCLA kind of took a couple hits early in the season, and because they were very highly regarded preseason, but then took a couple hits early, and everybody kind of fell out of everybody's top of mind point of view with that team. I think they've got the talent, and you're right. It's really how they handle the road trips that are coming up. I'm going to get crazy on my other one, though, and it's not Nebraska. Nebraska's playing great ball. I think they're a solid tournament team. I think there'll be a little regression to the mean with them. The team that impresses me, and I was watching them against Iowa State the other night, is I'm a big Ben McCollum fan, and I think Iowa, they're currently ranked now. They're 11-2, ranked 23rd in the country. I think Iowa, not to win the Big Ten. I don't think they have enough gas in the tank to do that, but they are going to be a disruptor in the Big Ten, just the way they play. And I think they're a top 5, potentially top 4 or 5 team in the Big Ten. What's really interesting, I'm looking at their stats, their team stats, and from a scoring perspective, they have Bennett Sturts, who came with McCollum, and he's very, very good, averages 17 points a game. They have no other players averaging double figures. They have 1, 2, 3, 4 players averaging like 8 points or higher, including, remember last year, a portal target, is it Antonio Folgaris from Robert Morris? Do you remember him, Ryan?
Yeah, Alvaro. One of the more stranger portal recruitments too, because he was a name you heard with Tennessee. but never came for a visit. And you kind of heard him mention with Kentucky, I think was one of them. A couple of like big names, and obviously Iowa's no slouch either. But that was a very strange portal recruitment. But no, he's been good for him, and he's done. I think he's shot it pretty well from three, which is obviously was kind of. He's a little bit bigger, a little more physical, but he kind of had that Igor Milicic role or mold, I guess. That was kind of the scout on him. A little bit bigger, more physical Igor.
I was just going to say, he's the Igor we wish we had. I've watched him play a little bit. To your point, he's shooting 46% from three, and averaging about 9 points, 5-6 boards, 3 assists. He's just, in that Iowa State game, I was just watching. He's just got a nice feel. He plays up at the perimeter a lot, kind of like you were saying, what we were hoping we would get from Igor. And he's 6'10", got a little more physicality. That's I like Iowa. Let's just put it that way. And I love the whole, shirt and tie vibe that McCollum does. I hate it with PJ Fleck in football, but I love it with Ben McCollum.
It's no, I was when I was going through, I kind of had Iowa in that same kind of like how I view Georgia. Just curiosity, excited to watch them more because I really haven't watched them a ton at this point. But the UCLA game on Saturday and then next Sunday, I'm sure everybody will be watching NFL playoffs. But they host Illinois. That should be a really good game. That I'll be curious to a little bit of clash in style with the tempo that those two teams play a bit. But we'll be interested to see.
Yep, Big 12. It's tough to look past the fact that 2 of the top 3 or 4 teams in the rankings come from the Big 12 in Arizona and Iowa State. A lot of other good teams. It's a great conference. My pick to win it, you and I have been exchanging notes on this, and again, this is kind of an either or. There's some really good choices here, but I do like what Iowa State's doing. I mean, if they can continue to deliver offensively at the level they have been, we know their defense is elite level all the time. I'm on board with Iowa State at this point to win the Big 12.
Yeah, this was the hardest one for me in looking a number of directions, but I settled on Iowa State too. They just feel very complete. The Big 12 is so good at the top and so deep. I didn't really find that any of these schedules were all that different. I also think the conference did a really good job of a lot of good teams play each other twice. It doesn't feel like the SEC where you have a couple slip through the cracks with the scheduling. So, I go Iowa State. Here's the thing I'll say with Arizona. It's a little bit of a Michigan feel too, where this very similar. I don't see they go to TCU on January 10th, could lose that game, but wouldn't pick them to. Go to UCF on January 17th, kind of the same deal. Really, until they go to BYU the last week of January. Yeah, I don't. They're not going to lose a game, but again, it's just very backloaded. Where they play Colorado on the last day of the regular season. The 7 games before that, they don't play a team outside the top 30 in KenPom.
Wow.
Kansas at Kansas, Texas Tech at home, BYU at home, at Houston, at Baylor, Kansas at home, Iowa State at home, and that's. I've kind of had this comp a little bit that they remind me a little bit of the 19 Tennessee team, the second Grant and Admiral team, just from a build. That it feels very similar to that, where that team, Tennessee team, obviously got to number 1, was great in non-conference play. I think they lost that Kansas game in New York, maybe lost one other one that I'm forgetting, but then kind of a pretty manageable first half of SEC play, rolled, and then it was just a gauntlet in February where. Even though it didn't feel like Tennessee played bad, they just kind of naturally lost a couple close games in there. I kind of feel like Arizona could be in for a very similar path.
Yeah. Here's the one I think I mentioned at the beginning of the show. I said we were going to mention some of the usual suspects in some areas. My dark horse in the Big 12, there's 2 teams, and it's partly what you said a second ago about how tough it is at the top. These are 2 teams I think could end up, maybe they don't win the Big 12, but they could have deeper runs in March, just depending upon the way things go. And it's partly tied to the coaches. I got to go with my dark horses, as crazy as it sounds, to be Kansas and Houston, because they're not being talked about right now. I think you mentioned Houston in our last show. Ever since Tennessee beat them, they're murdering teams. And I mean, they're back in the top 10, but we don't talk about them at all.
Yeah, I mean they just hadn't played anybody big until that Arkansas game, and that they won by 10, and the game was probably more lopsided than the
Yeah.
final score indicated. So yeah, I mean just easily could see it. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I gave them a lot of thought for this exercise. Too, the schedule is very tough, as everybody's is, but maybe a couple worse breaks. The team I went with for mine was BYU, which again, talking about top 10 team, is kind of same thing with Houston. It's not that much of a
Yeah.
dark horse, but they've just been. I mean, not under the radar because I don't really think that's true. But just second fiddle to Iowa State, just like Houston, a second fiddle to Iowa State and Arizona, and they lose a game. Well, the Connecticut game was in Boston, I think, by 2 points. All they've lost. They've had to come back to beat Clemson in Madison Square Garden, but other than that, they've kind of run over everybody else they've played. I think they're a pretty complete team. I think I'm going to say they have the best player in the conference in AJ DeBonsa, slightly better than Joshua Jefferson and Kingston Flemings.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see if Darren Peterson ever gets healthy and plays, but that's kind of who I would go with. Thought exercise for you here. Just while you were talking a minute ago, I ran all the Ken Pom projected conference records. What do you think? Any guesses? In because they all have different win record predictions, so there's no ties here. Arizona, all the 5 teams we've talked about: Arizona, Iowa State, Kansas, Houston, BYU. What do you think Ken Pom predicts them in order of finish?
Oh God. I will say Iowa State, BYU, Arizona, Houston, and Kansas.
You're a little bit off. You got the last 2 right. Kansas was 5 at 11-7. Houston was 4 at 12-6. Top 3: Arizona at 15-3, Iowa State 14-4, and then BYU 13-5.
Okay, I figured there.
And let's see, Texas Tech 11-7 too. So they're right in there with Kansas.
Yeah, and I should qualify what I said about Kansas. I think it's all dependent on how long, are they just putting Darren Peterson on ice till conference really throttles up here in the next week or so, or what? Because very different team with him out there. They're still pretty good without him, as Tennessee learned, but I'm not sure I'd hold him in that same regard if Peterson's going to be a prolonged absence this season.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that situation is just kind of getting weird. Doing some reading on it, it sounds like the doctors have cleared him. It's kind of been his family that hasn't wanted him to play, and then naturally, when that's the case, and the guy's making a lot of money, you're at a place like Kansas, people care that much. It feels like that thing could borderline get a little toxic. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's certainly not there yet, but
Yeah.
it also wouldn't shock me if it kind of takes a turn in that direction.
Let's plow through our other remaining Power 5 teams, because these ones are kind of, to me at least, no-brainers. ACC, Duke. It's hard for me to even pick a dark horse. Maybe North Carolina. I mean, because they're playing pretty well. Caleb Wilson's great. I don't know much about them beyond that. North Carolina State may be a dark horse, but to me, it's like Duke and everybody else at this point.
Yeah, I think the top 4 race will be fascinating. The Henry Vassar kid's been from Arizona, has been great from North Carolina. I do think he's been a good second fiddle to Caleb Wilson, or probably even a 1A, 1B. I still trust Louisville as a top 4 team. I'd be surprised if either of those teams don't finish top 4. But in the last, and that's what I went with Virginia as my dark horse. They've just been really, really solid, and it even feels like they've shot the 3 really well, and they're rebounding the ball in the offensive glass really well. And to me, the glass stuff is a little bit wait and see, but the 3-point shooting feels, it feels replicable. It doesn't feel crazy. It's a bunch of different guys hitting shots, nobody doing it. I guess Jakari White is the kid from North Dakota State is doing it at an extremely high clip, but in a lot of shots. But besides that, it's all been pretty manageable, and a lot of guys that space the floor. So that would kind of be the team I'm interested to see. They actually play here in a few hours. Some nice New Year's Eve day hoops against Virginia Tech in their conference opener. So shout out Ryan Sylvia. Shout out the Who's. They're a team that I'm excited to see, and I would slightly give the edge. I think I would go Virginia, Clemson, NC State in that tier behind Duke's tier 1 alone, as we said, then UNC and Louisville. I think some order 2 and 3, and then that's how I would rank that next tier in the ACC.
ACC definitely much better than last season. There's no doubt about that. It's a much better conference, but still feels like it's Duke's to lose without a doubt. Finally, Big East. Again, we've talked about the Big East. To me, it's down for sure. And UConn is the cream of the crop for me. I struggled to even find a dark horse. I mean, maybe Pitino gets St. John's going. I'm not too impressed with what I've seen from them so far. Seton Hall is kind of sneaky good. Nerds like you and I probably pay attention to that, but a lot of people don't realize Seton Hall's got a pretty good team right now.
Yeah, Bud Clark, who's the cousin of former Tennessee assistant Rod Clark, has been awesome after transferring over from Merrimack. So, yeah, no, I think it's same deal. I'd be shocked if UConn doesn't win the league, and to me, it's. And I've heard Will Warren say this on his podcast, and it's just someone's got to win games. It's not a very good conference, and someone's got to win games. I do think I would have Villanova as the dark horse, or to me right now, I think they're a clear third best team. I just trust Kevin Willard; he's a good coach. Caden Lewis kind of falling through the cracks has been big for them. And the thing I'll say too is, opponent shooting 37% from 3-point range against them, which ranks 327 nationally. It feels like you easily could get some regression there and get a little bit better luck. So I think Villanova's for sure a tournament team. I don't love St. John's, but I do think they're for sure a tournament team. And after that, it's kind of can somebody else get in? Can Seton Hall get in? Maybe Butler makes a push. I won't give up on your long lost cousin at Creighton just yet, but I don't see that as much with that roster. So that's what'll be most interesting.
Definitely. Hey, last thing, and this is kind of part 2 to this. We talked earlier about the Big 12. One team we didn't mention was Baylor, but they were part of a topic that dominated the headlines over the holidays. And it's really, I just wanted to spend a minute on this because it is newsworthy, and that's this. There's these perceived nebulous rules and how some programs are interpreting or leveraging the ambiguity of it all to help add instant strength to their respective rosters. I mean, the story I'm referring to is, and I'll probably butcher the pronunciation, but is it James Najai? Is that right? Does that sound right?
I'm not sure. I haven't even heard anybody pronounce it. Just read it.
This kid was in the G League. I think it's by this point I'm so confused. He might have even had a cup of coffee on an NBA roster, but he was on a 2-way deal, so it wasn't a firm NBA contract. And he has eligibility remaining, and lo and behold, he's eligible immediately at midseason. He's coming to play at Baylor, and we're seeing all sorts of who's who in coaches, not necessarily Coach Barnes, at least I haven't seen, but Tom Izzo, John Calipari, Danny Hurley, everybody's speaking out going, man, what is happening here? And then the last thing I'll say before I get your thoughts on it, Ryan, is Seth Davis, who we all follow, makes a comment of, I don't know why everybody's freaking out. It's no different than schools like, Tennessee did a version of this with Santiago Vescovi, and Illinois just did it. They brought another itch guy in season. So there's some points of view. It just further underscores there is no leadership at the top of this thing, and it's starting to become a problem.
Yeah, I will say I don't think Santi was really this way because he was 18. He was actually the age of a college freshman when he came to Tennessee.
True. Good point. Yeah.
Ethan Berg's 23.
Yeah.
So, and I had this conversation with a friend of mine who was actually in coaching last weekend. Look, he's against it. He's against all of it, but he says, the European guys, this is the exact same. I kind of disagree with that. And look, I see the argument. To me, my thing is those European guys, from my perspective, I know it was a possibility. They did not turn down college basketball to play professional basketball. That was just the natural course, was to play professional basketball next, and then college basketball was an option. This kid at Baylor turned down college basketball to go play in the G League. So to me, that's where it feels different. I don't think he played in the NBA, though he was part of a trade. He got traded from Charlotte to the Knicks. So Yeah, look, I think I've seen the positive spin on it. It's been you got to have this thing hit rock bottom so everybody can unite and make a change. And you know, the optimist is hopefully that this will lead to that. But I don't know, Bob. I'm not really an optimist, so
Yeah.
I don't like it, and we'll see if it actually leads to any good.
Yeah, I mean, the thing the fact that I'm seeing meaningful comments from like John Calipari. We always have that running joke, and I like the guy. I don't particularly
Yeah,
like Cal, but
yeah,
I thought his comments were really, really good the other day. And Hurley now saying we need a commissioner, because Hurley, you say what you want about him, he's a bit of a nut job on the sidelines and everything, but he absolutely loves this game, and you can see that he's looking at it like this is not what I'm signed up for. So I'm hopeful that that's going to sway at some point. There's going to be some sort of leadership applied to this, so there's just less ambiguity. That's all.
yeah. No, hopefully so. And I made a joke on your show yesterday that it was kind of with Calipari, it was the heartbreaking worst person makes great point. Which
Yeah,
Calipari is not quite the worst person I know, but certainly not one of my favorites in the sport. And I thought Izzo stuff was like, yeah, I'm gonna call Scott Drew and talk to him about it was interesting. So,
yeah.
uh, yeah, it's hopefully it'll get cleaned up. All right, one question I have going back to the last topic: would you be what to use more likely? Duke does not win the ACC, or UConn does not win the Big East.
Oh, I think Duke won. What's less likely is Duke, or no? What you're? I'm sorry. Now I'm confused.
I
What
didn't phrase it well. What's more likely?
more likely?
Yeah, which one
I'd
of those
say
teams doesn't win?
I think Duke not winning the ACC, just because there are a couple like you mentioned, Carolina, Louisville. You've got some pretty solid teams right behind them. UConn, to me, I don't see another ranked team in that Big East besides UConn right now.
Yeah, no, I would say the same thing. I do think the counterpoint would be to that, playing devil's advocate is, the Big East is so bad. Like I think St. John's, even though I'm not high on them, I think they can still stack up a lot of wins, and then you still
Yeah,
win against UConn. Maybe maybe you're right there, but whereas Louisville, I just think some of their flaws are going to have a hard time stacking enough wins.
yeah,
But certainly more capable teams in the ACC. It feels like. Where if anyone other than St. John's or UConn won in the Big East, it would be truly stunning.
right. And then I have one more question for you, and we didn't even talk about this, although we exchanged texts about him. Did I get that right? Is Christian Anderson a true freshman at Texas Tech?
I believe so. Let me double check that.
I mean,
But I think so.
he's another one, man. That's like, what a class! If he's a true freshman, that kid is as smooth as just about anybody I've seen, man. He's right in for me, he's kind of right in the Mikel Brown level type of player. How he impacts the game, shooting, distributing, everything else. Very impressed with him.
Sophomore, but yes,
Sophomore.
no, he's very good and very much a great 1-2 punch that Texas Tech has.
Yeah.
With Toppin or yeah, with
And I like McCaslin so much as a coach too. I think I'm always looking ahead. Not that we want Rick to be gone or anything like that, but you think about life after Rick Barnes and who would be a great fit here. And boy, someone like McCaslin seems like he'd be a fun coach to root for.
Yeah, no doubt. Interesting. I'm looking at it now. Christian Anderson, low 4-star, number 122 player in the country.
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. All right, we got to bring this thing home. So a couple things we want to do real quick as we close out 2025 and move into 2026 and start SEC conference play. What is our pick for the number of conference wins for the Vols? It's an 18-game conference season. Let's set the number at 11 and a half wins. Ryan, do you think the Vols go over or under that number?
I'll say over ever so slightly. I'll say to go 12-6. The schedule is really fascinating. I mean, it's going to be just a brutal January for Tennessee. I think you're going to see probably some people, if I had to guess, give up on this team. But can you find a way to steal a road game? Can you win Saturday at Arkansas? Can you, I have a hard time seeing them win at Florida. Can you
Yeah.
win in Tuscaloosa? Can you win in Athens, which is a place Tennessee never plays well?
Yeah.
And that's going to be on a Tuesday night at what is a dark and dreary Stegeman Coliseum. So it's a hard. I mean, and in Kentucky at home, who's Tennessee's probably been worse against it at home than any other team in the SEC over the last 4 or 5 years. So it is a hard January for this Tennessee team. Can you take care of business at home, which you should in the month of January, and then can you find a way to win really just one? If you can get one game against Arkansas, Florida, Alabama, Georgia on the home, I don't think you're fine. And then if you find a way to get 2 of those games, you find a way to lose only 2 games in the SEC play in January. That's kind of the point I could see Tennessee being in this SEC race till late in the year.
Yeah. I'm with you. I've got over, I'd say, but I'm with you. It'd be like 12 wins, maybe 13, maybe, but and I don't know what wins the conference this year. Maybe 14-4. I don't know. Maybe 15-3. Hard to tell, but I go slightly over. And then lastly, let's each pick one New Year's resolution for Tennessee basketball in 2026. What would those be? You go first, Ryan.
This is tough. Me going first. I had 2 ones prepared, and the obvious one's just shoot free throws better. That's going to be maddening because that's what the point I was kind of getting to earlier. This is a team that is going to get to the foul line a decent bit. And look, the guys that get there, Jalen Carey probably and at the top of the list is not a very good free throw shooter. I do think Nate's a pretty good free throw shooter, and he's the other guy that's going to get there a lot. But it's been a reoccurring issue at this point. The good news, I think, there is the guys that can ice games for you. Jacoby's great at the foul line. I do think Nate's good, so that's the positive. But it feels like you're going to be in for a lot of frustrating 1 or 2 trips to the line here in SEC play. So that's, if I had to say one thing to clean up, it would probably be that.
Yeah, I mean, the free throws was on my list. My other one is, again, we talked about this earlier in the show, accept who we are as a team, and that means inside out for sure. We're not some 5-out squad. I know that's modern basketball. That's not going to be who we are, but we can still be successful. I think if we can hit what we've been showing in the last few games against Louisville, I think we hit 7 threes, against Gardner-Webb, 10, last night against South Carolina State, 8. If they can hit somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 3-pointers per game, keeping in mind they're shooting, not more than 24 or 25, I can live with that. I mean, if they can even shoot at a better clip, like maybe 10 of 25, 10 of 27, they're in that 38% range, which is kind of a magic number if you listen to Will Warren. That can work. We're just not going to be volume 3-point shooters, but we do need to hit some threes. It feels like we're taking some, but it's not dominating our game plan. We just got to hit them. We can't have the games where we're hitting 2 and 3 3-pointers a game. That will do this team in.
Yeah, 4 at Syracuse. I mean, they only took 13, but still that type of thing. And none of their 5 game. I mean, they hit 11. They shot the crap out of the ball against Rutgers, and they're 5 games against competent teams. They haven't made more than 7. Made 7 against Kansas. Made 7 against Louisville. 5 against Houston, kind of ironically, but only shot 17. So, can you find a little bit? The other one I will say, Tennessee right now, their defensive rebounding rate 27.6. Can you get that down to 25.5 is what I'd like to see. That would get them to right around top 30 nationally. They're not going to be as good of a defensive rebounding team than an offensive rebounding team, but I just don't want it to feel like this Tennessee team's an elite offensive rebounding team and a just slightly above average defensive rebounding team. I want to feel like this is a good rebounding team on both ends of the court, and just an elite one offensively.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, it's about to start, man. Friday night, Big Ten has huge games. USC going to Ann Arbor to take on Michigan. Michigan State going to Lincoln to take on undefeated Nebraska. Saturday, SEC, we talked about Auburn traveling to Athens to take on Georgia. Kentucky, we're going to see what they're made of. They go down to Tuscaloosa to take on Alabama. And, of course, game of the day is our guys, Tennessee against number 18, Arkansas at Bud Walton Arena in Fayetteville. You will be there. Let's go, man. I'm kind of excited. Let's see what this team's got in them, right?
Yeah, it's tune-up's done, and we've learned a good bit about this team, and excited to see the show get going, and just excited for conference play in general. Obviously Christmas is probably the sleepiest week of the college basketball season, so
Yeah.
excited for things to get picked back up again here late this week, and certainly this weekend should be a lot of fun.
Now it won't end until late March, early April. It'll be nonstop. So here we go. Hey, listen, to all you listeners out there, appreciate you spending time with us. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button for the show if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're listening to us as a podcast, make sure you download our podcast. It's available wherever you listen to your pods. We really do appreciate you making the time to check our show out. We enjoy doing it. Ryan, thanks always for you and all the great work you're doing, and looking forward to chopping it up again with you the next time, because next time we're going to be talking about recapping 2 very big games in conference and looking ahead to a road trip to Florida. It's about to get real, man, but enjoy doing this with you as always.
Yeah, fun one to get a little predictions in. We'll see how we look here in a couple months, but
Yeah.
Big week for Tennessee. It'll be interesting to see how they fare at Arkansas, and it feels like that could be a big statement type game for Tennessee if they can come out on the right side of things.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Looking forward to it. Thank you, my man. And to all of you out there, Happy New Year. Have a great weekend. Be safe out there. And we will see you next time on the RTI Rim Runner.